I'll go with this one just because it's shorter. Skip Hansen writes, do you think that World War II could be won by the U.S. today? Will the millennials fight for things that they don't believe in at home today? And if we force the young to go and fight, I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering that. Then where will we get the people at home to support the troops? Where will we get the new Rosie the Riveter? 65 and 70-year-olds can only do so much. The biggest decision after 4 years of college young men have to make is today is which bathroom to use. Yeah, that's exactly right, Skip. That's really good. I may have to steal that, honestly. That's the toughest decision they have to make is which bathroom to use. They don't have to go out there and lie about their age so they can go out and get killed with the rest of their friends. In answer to your question about whether World War II could be fought today, I don't think it could be fought today. I don't think it could be started today, to be honest with you. This is why I'm not too worried about the increasing tensions with Russia. In the Cold War, I didn't think we'd survive the Cold War. I remember thinking very clearly when I was probably 10 or 11, 12, somewhere in there, 14. I thought, if we can make it out of the 70s and make it out of the 80s, we'll be okay, but I don't think we're going to. And Russia was this dark, backwards place filled with dark, backwards people. And since then, we've gotten to know them a little better. I certainly have, anyway. It's embarrassing to me that Moscow is so much cleaner and newer and prettier than Los Angeles, but Putin's decided to put money into the city, and that's what happens. So the reason I say I don't think a World War II could be started again would be, let's say we wanted to just back up the clock and we're going to say, okay, is it possible that we'd go to war with Germany and Japan, and we'd send bombers over there, and whose factories would we be bombing? We'd be bombing our own factories. We'd go to war with China and drop bombs on the Apple factory. Who's getting hurt here? The economy of the world is so intertwined. That's a very strong tie to sever today. And another one is people have gotten to know each other through Facebook and documentary films and so on. I mean, people didn't understand anything. They didn't understand anything about animals. Nobody knew anything about the water. I remember when Jacques Cousteau came out with his show. People said, "My God, look, there are fish. There are things under the water. It's brand new." And this is kind of an awakening that I think has been very, very good. People used to hunt whales for oil because they thought they were beasts. They were simply robots. They were big, fat flesh robots that did nothing but swim and eat and swim and eat and had no intellect or emotional life whatsoever. And as long as they were big, giant meat robots, you could go and kill as many as you want to, and there you go. But once you realize that these things have individual songs, that they have a song for each one of them individually, that the way they take care of their young, the communication, once you see it in documentary film footage, you don't think of them as meat robots anymore, and the idea of killing them for oil is repugnant to you. And that kind of thing has been going on, I think, with the rest of the world. I thought about doing, and I might still do, a firewall, and I forgot, I had a pretty good title for it. I was going to call it Our Friend the H-Bomb. And I was basically just going to say, nuclear weapons have kept the peace for 75 years now. They've kept the peace to such a degree that existential wars, the kind of wars where you could literally lose your country, are inconceivable today. Inconceivable. And I think this is not as cynical as it sounds. I think the reason that nuclear weapons have kept the peace is because throughout history, old men have sent young men off to war to be killed. And in the age of nuclear weapons, it's the old men who are going to get killed. There is no front line in a nuclear war. You don't get to have an adventure and let the masses go running at machine gun nests on the bank of the Somme in order for the glory of the empire, or for the glory of the Kaiser, for that matter. If you decide you want to pick a fight with somebody who's got a nuclear weapon, then chances are pretty good that you're going to go up in flames. And if you don't, you're not going to like the world that you see when you come out of your bunker. So our friend the H-bomb has made large-scale war virtually inconceivable. It's never happened before. And I think that's really it. It's actually kept the peace, and we should be thankful for that. I understand they're horrible. I understand them. I understand them much better than most people, I would say. Certainly much better than people on the left. In fact, I'm fascinated by them, and I would say I have a very good knowledge of them and their yield and the history of them and how they're delivered and so on. But everybody talks about disarmament and how good disarmament would be, but if we were to disarm, we'd be at war all the time. People talk about how good the left talks about these primitive people, and why do we have to live in our warlike modern society? Why can't we be like primitive people and sit around the campfire and weave baskets and eat the food that's available right on the trees, and everybody shares equally? I have a couple answers to that. First of all, you can if you want to, but the fact that you don't is telling me something. If you want to go live in the Amazon and sit cross-legged in the forest, I'm sure they could find a way to overcome your initial ignorance and stupidity and feed you long enough for you to figure out how to hunt and do all the other things and trap and fish and whatever and gather. And you can go and live an authentic life just like an absolute savage in the jungles of the Amazon. And I use the word savage and jungles because they're good words. The reason I say that they're savages is because when you actually get down to the brass tacks of what actually happens rather than what you wish would happen, you find that primitive people are at war far more often, and in far deadlier conflicts than civilized people are. Far more. They're at war all the time. All the time. There's raids against other people for trophies, for women. I think the worst culture that's ever lived on the earth was the Aztec culture, and these civilization raided, the entire hemisphere in order to sacrifice victims. I have an understanding, I think the number's correct. I think they sacrificed, no joke now, on a very important holy day, they sacrificed 80,000 slaves, 80,000 captives in 4 days. That's well beyond Auschwitz working at full capacity. So, here we are in the world. I don't foresee a World War III. I'm trying to see if I can get my mind around a serious shooting war with China over the Straits of Taiwan, let's say. And I can see that conflict escalating. I can see it going nuclear. I can't quite get all the way to, there's the end of Beijing and Washington because of Taiwan. I think, and of course the problem with disarmament is, even if it was a good idea, and I suspect it's not, because it never has been, I suspect that it would be bad if one side disarmed and the other one didn't. This is why I think my favorite statement about philosophy of defense came from some American general, somebody in the Joint Chiefs. I don't remember who it was. Somebody will probably tell me. This, I want to say it was in the 90s. I think it was somewhere around there. They were talking about the peace dividend that Russia had fallen and disarmament and the nuclear freeze and all the rest of this stuff. And this guy captured exactly precisely how I feel in one sentence. That sentence is this. He said, "The day may come when the lion and the lamb do in fact lie together in peace, but if that day ever comes, we'd better damn sure be the lion." And I thought, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Why? Because the lion controls the destiny of both those partners. The lion and the lamb lying down together in peace is a wonderful idea. It genuinely is. I'm not just tossing that away. It's the way to go. It's the way to live. I've lived in peace my entire life. But it's the lion's decision. The lamb is dependent on the goodwill of the lion. And if the lion changes his mind, then that's just too damn bad for the lamb. So I think the lamb ought to ammo up, because I don't want my existence, my freedom, my family, or anything else in the hands of other people whose good intentions I'm required to trust. I just am not willing to do it. So I know that's a bit of a roundabout answer, Skip, but I don't know how else to answer it. I don't see a world where Russia and America, Russia and China, China and America are going to nuke each other with everything we've got. I can see a world where things get out of hand, but they haven't yet. Was it Curtis LeMay who said that, Wild Goose? Was it actually Curtis LeMay? Because if he did say that, my respect for him goes even higher. In any event, I don't know. I don't know. I have friends who are in the military, friends who were deeply involved with what was going on in Syria in real time. I might get a chance to ask them about whether or not brushing up against the Russians in Syria could have gotten really out of hand and really ugly if one of those aircraft had been shot down by accident or even intentionally or whatever. But they were able to deconflict it, and we always have been able to deconflict it since 1945. We've deconflicted the big fights and left everything to proxy wars, which we haven't had one of those in a long time either. Vietnam or Korea, it's America versus Russia, through the South Koreans versus the North Koreans, or the South Vietnamese versus the North Vietnamese. I do see Kim Jong-un being lunatic enough to launch a nuclear weapon at the U.S. because I think he is just bat guano crazy. And all of the people in his society, it's 70 years now, none of the people in Korea really, except for ancient people, have had any contact with reality at all. They think the entire world speaks Korean because it's the best language. And I don't see how Kim doesn't buy into that. It's one thing, I guess just to close it up, I want to say it was Martin Amos, Kingsley Amos's son, wrote a book about communism called Laughter in the 20 Million. And he made a point I thought was really, really superb. He was talking about how unprepared Russia was, the Soviet Union was, for the German invasion. And not just unprepared, but they just previously gutted their military with purges, and reports were coming in from everywhere about this massive buildup on the German side. German reconnaissance airplanes were flying over the Soviet Union. Many of them had to land because of mechanical problems, and the Soviets fixed the engines and gassed them up and sent them back. And Stalin told people, I think it was Beria, the night before the invasion, said, God bless, he didn't say God bless, he said, here's to Comrade Stalin, the Germans will never invade us in 1941. And then the next day it happened. But the point Amos was making, that I thought was a really terrific point, was this. And this reflects back on the Kim issue. He said that he didn't think that Hitler would invade Russia because he didn't want Hitler to invade Russia. And that would be enough reason that it wouldn't happen. Because over the course of 20 years, prior to that invasion, anything that Stalin wanted came true. If he wanted somebody dead, they died. If he wanted a hydroelectric dam built in the North Pole, it happened. And he became so conditioned to having his will become law that he simply had lost touch with reality. And that Amos bolsters his case, and many other writers have bolstered their case by looking at what happened to Stalin when the invasion actually did come. He basically fell apart. He was there for a day or two immediately upon the invasion. And after a very short time, I think less than 48 hours, he suddenly just didn't come in to the Kremlin, didn't come into work, didn't show up for almost a week. He was at home curled up in a ball. And after something like a week of no leader, with the Germans pushing in unbelievably deep, something like 95% of the, or 98% of the Russian Air Force destroyed by the Germans in the first 2 days, some incredible number. So Stalin retreated to his little dacha and had essentially a breakdown. And when the leaders, when Molotov and Beria and I guess it might have been Khrushchev at that point, a couple of others, went out to the dacha and walked in on Stalin. Stalin looked up and said, "Why are you here?" And it's clear to everybody that Stalin thought he was going to be arrested and shot because he committed the biggest military blunder in history. I mean, it's just the most appalling failure in history, the unpreparedness of the Russians and what it cost them. But they said, "Hey, Joe, we want you to come back, Koba, and want you to take over the war." And he did, and he spent a year overconfident, and then he started to listen to his generals like Zhukov, and next thing you know, there they go. But my point here is this. Stalin believed that Hitler wouldn't invade because Stalin didn't want it to be so. And that week of him having a nervous breakdown was the amount of time it took for him to reconnect to the fact that reality was independent of his wishes. It took him that long, and it took something of that magnitude too, by the way, something that catastrophic, for him to be shocked back into the reality that the world is not the way he wants it to be just because he wants it to be that way. And I suspect that kind of thing goes on with Kim and is much, much worse. I think when people are telling you that you're basically a living god and that North Korea is the best country in the world and that our people are the most powerful and we defeated America and we chased them out and so on and so on and so on, and now we have nuclear weapons and we're unstoppable. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that somebody could be that unreasonable. And this is, just since we're talking about the war on this last question, this is a possibility, I think. I think a possibility of a North Korea nuclear strike is real only because they're that insane. And this brings me back to the final thought of this whole thing, which is, like we're talking about before about disarmament. This kind of scenario is precisely what all of Reagan's initial anti-missile defenses actually could handle. Reagan knew that there was no way that they could stop 25,000 incoming warheads at the same time. He understood that. He was playing to bankrupt the Soviets, and it worked. But we have got some very, very capable anti-missile systems. And Barack Obama pulled a bunch of them out, and certainly if he didn't stop the development on them, he certainly didn't boost it any. But even several years ago, I talked to a guy who had worked on guidance previously for one of these big defense contractors, was working on guidance on, and I said, "Is it really true we can hit these warheads?" And he said to me, "We can hit whichever part of the warhead you want us to hit." That's tall talk, but they do it. They shoot a bullet down with another bullet. And progressives will say, "Well, that's only got a 60% success rate, or a 20% success rate." And my reply to that is, well, then let's launch 200 of them. Why don't we? You try and flip a coin 200 times in a row and have it come up heads every time. And there was the airborne laser that would shoot them in the boost phase, and we've still got a fair amount of it. You've got the Aegis destroyers that carry an upgraded Standard 3 missile that can hit them in the mid phase while they're outside the atmosphere before they come in. We used to have airborne lasers that could take them out on the launch phase and put the wreckage right back over where it left. That would be nice. I suspect we have, I know we have things like upgraded Patriots and the THAAD defense, the theater high altitude anti-missile defense or anti-aircraft defense, something like that, THAAD. So we've got a lot of means of stopping this. I also have a great deal of confidence in our intelligence service. I believe that Donald Trump, if intelligence was convinced that he's going to launch this against the U.S., Guam, or Japan, and this isn't just a test, we have inside information that this one's for real, then I have no doubt that Trump would destroy it on the pad. And when they were talking about launching from submarines, which cuts the response time way down from a leisurely 15 minutes to a rather terse 4 minutes, I thought, man, that North Korean submarine. And then the second I thought of it, I thought, Bill, you've been on board a U.S. nuclear attack sub, an old one, and there's no way that submarine is ever going to launch that missile. It's just simply not going to happen. I assure you that that Korean missile launching submarine is noisy enough for them to be able to hear it leave port in North Korea and hear it in San Diego. I assure you. And if you think that ballistic sub can get out there without having 2 or 3 American Los Angeles class or Sea Wolf class or Virginia class submarines a couple thousand yards astern in the baffles, you got another thing coming. And by the way, these submarines don't just go sailing through the water and all of a sudden push the button and off they go. They're going to launch. This is true for our boomers as well. They're going to launch. The sub has to stop, and then it has to come up to launch depth, and that's a very precise depth. And then they have to open the outer doors, and that makes noise and all the rest of it. There's no way they're going to get that shot off in a submarine. So that would be great. I mean, the best solution to this would be to have incontrovertible evidence that they were about to launch, and we simply nipped it in the bud, Andy. The missile never got out of the silo, and that submarine's at the bottom of the ocean, and so is the crew. And if you've got any more nuclear submarines, Kim, we got more torpedoes where those came from. Or you put a cruise missile strike in on the pad if they're going to launch from land and you're convinced that this is the one. And I don't think you have to be entirely convinced. I think you have to have a pretty good likelihood. If somebody's holding a gun to your head and threatening to kill you, then Han's allowed to shoot first in a case like that. So I suspect if they think it was a real one, they would then be a pretty simple thing, really, I imagine, for a submarine launch cruise missile attack on the launch pad. People don't realize how, well, I guess some people do, how fragile a missile is. And anybody who's ever watched the footage of a rocket going up and then coming down and exploding, I mean, you've got this enormous amounts of energy in the propellant and the oxidant. And the Atlas rocket that launched the Mercury orbital capsules, John Glenn rode an Atlas into space. It looks like it's made out of solid steel. It's a real tough-looking rocket, but the skin on an Atlas rocket is thinner than a dime. So they don't have what we've got or what the Russians have. They don't have hardened silos that can just simply slide open and pop off they go. They got to crate this thing out to this launch pad and crank it up to the vertical, and they got to fuel it and all the rest of it. And these things take time. And I am very, very confident of our ability to see these things and to know what's going on. And in this case, I think we have a president who, given enough convincing evidence, would say, okay, you pointed a gun at her head. You're telling us you're going to kill us. You've just cocked the weapon. That's it. That's it. That's all the risk we're going to take. Anyway, that'll do it, I think, for this episode. What is this? 164. I just put 163 up yesterday. Sometimes it takes a while. I'll try and put up 164 right now onto YouTube. But as always, thanks again for coming out, and thanks for your support for the members out there. And I think I'm out of town next Wednesday. Pretty sure I am, but I'll let you know. if any event, if I am, I'll be back the following Wednesday, and we'll have more stories to tell. So thanks for being with us, especially thanks for all the people who watch this live and make it so much fun watching the comment section. And I think that'll do it for episode 164. So until next time, everybody, be careful out there, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.